Welcome to Arcane Station. I'm your host, Mike Porter, and tonight, under a full moon, we walk the forgotten backroads of America, where ancient legends may still linger in the shadows. From dusty scrolls and medieval trials to modern police reports and cryptid sightings, we'll trace the chilling arc of the man-beast mythos. These stories aren't just folklore. They're documented, strange, and disturbingly consistent. We begin with the ancient myths, then follow their echoes through biblical text, Viking rituals, and medieval sorcery. From there, we'll step into the woods of Wisconsin, the haunted trails of Kentucky, and the eerie silence of cemeteries where dogmen are said to roam. Let's start where all legends begin, with the ancient world's fear of transformation. In ancient Greece, the myth of King Lycaon tells of a ruler so wicked that he served Zeus human flesh, the king's own son Nyctimus. For this desecration, Zeus transformed him into a wolf, forever stripped of his humanity. That primal metaphor, man becoming beast, gave us the term lycanthropy, and it echoes through the centuries of folklore. In our Legend of Boggy Creek episode, I discussed the Nephilim and how man's interaction with the fallen may have created abominations. I also discussed how ancient gods may have been either the offspring of the fallen or the fallen themselves, the Watchers. Now imagine Zeus as a fallen angel, powerful in ways that mortals could not comprehend. When deceived, the anger of a god is unimaginable. In that context, a punishment of turning someone into a beast isn't so far-fetched. While the Greeks saw this transformation as divine curse, the Vikings saw it as a choice. Shift north into Scandinavia and Viking lore, and you'll find not metaphor, but ritualized fury. The berserkers, especially the Ulfnedar, or wolfcoats, were warriors said to enter battle into a trance, wearing wolf pelts, roaring with animal fury, and shrugging off pain. Some historians suggest that this bloodlust wasn't just fury, it may have been chemically induced. Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric mushroom, is a strong candidate. When properly prepared, it's a hallucinogenic known for increasing strength, altering perception, and inducing rage. Others suspect henbane or other psychoactive botanicals. Whether potion or ritual, the result was the same: a warrior who looked lost in transformation, wild in mind if not in body. Covered in the pelts of either wolves or bears, these warriors waded into battle, drunk on bloodlust. This disguise and the relentless nature in which their attacks took place may have inspired people to think that they had truly transformed into these creatures. By the Middle Ages, the line between metaphor and belief blurred. Europe saw a surge of werewolf trials, where many claimed to have used potions made from belladonna, mandrake, or datura, applied as a transformational or flying ointment to enter wolf form. Whether they used hallucinogens or rituals, the outcome of becoming a werewolf created fear and prompted trials for suspected lichens. Another possibility is spell work, the intentional act of transformation through the use of black or dark magic. These weren't just mythical tales. Throughout history and folklore, there are fascinating accounts of individuals who claim to transform intentionally. Their sorcerer-induced volkolic or werewolves were deeply believed in the South Slavic and Eastern European traditions, where a distinct motif of sorcerers willingly transforming into wolves through spells or rituals. According to folklore, a sorcerer might recite a specific incantation and leap over a ritual object, like a knife, a yoke, or a threshold, to trigger this transformation. They might also use enchanted belts, also known back then as girdles, or they would have pelt overlays. These transformations were often done intentionally for harm or revenge, making them one of the few traditions featuring voluntary magical change into a wolf, not tied to lunar cycles or curses. Another example of a magical girdle is the tale of Peter Stump, the werewolf of Bedburg, who was executed in 1589 in Germany for alleged lycanthropy, witchcraft, and cannibalism. Under torture, he claimed that the devil himself had given him a magical belt or girdle that enabled him to transform into a wolf. While no such belt was ever recovered, this claim clearly reflects the folklore motif of intentional transformation via enchanted clothing. In a notable 1692 trial in Livonia, which is now modern-day Estonia, Thies of Kaltenbrunn professed that he had voluntarily transformed into a wolf 3 times a year to battle witches and demons in hell, all in service of protecting the harvest. He described the transformation not as a curse, but as a chosen role enacted by stripping down and entering into the forest. This case is interpreted by scholars as a folkloric survival of shamanistic practices, where the werewolf is a willing magical actor rather than a victim or a cursed being. Beyond these specific stories, broader folklore motifs describe people who become werewolves by magic around the world and in quite a few native indigenous tribes. And this idea of human-animal hybrids doesn't just show up in folklore. It has a long documented history in our religious and cultural texts as well. Let's look into scripture and oral traditions from the biblical era. In the book of Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar becomes so prideful that he's struck mad, sent into the wilderness to live among the beasts. His hair grows like eagle feathers, his nails like claws, and he is said to have eaten grass. While not a literal werewolf, the transformation of a monarch into an animal strikes at our collective fear that the civilized can devolve into a beast. Then there's Genesis 6 and the enigmatic Nephilim, offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. These giants are considered a hybrid, with traits of angel, human, witch, werewolf, and vampire. In the non-canonical books of the Book of Enoch and the Book of Giants, which were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls with all the books of the Bible with the exception of the Book of Esther, the story from Genesis becomes even clearer, referencing monstrous beings and wild, destructive creatures in wilderness places. Other religions also speak of transformations. In the Torah, certain midrashic stories describe wicked figures being made like beasts as part of God's judgment. These are generally symbolic, but they sometimes blur into folklore territory where physical change is implied. The Talmud and other rabbinic commentaries describe shape-shifting demons and sorcerers who have the ability to change appearances. And in the Quran and the Hadith, Allah punishes a group of Sabbath breakers by transforming them into apes, an example of physical human-to-animal transformation as a divine act. The ancient world didn't just speak of these beasts as metaphors or parables, but as people and culture that was encountered in the world. Long before any dogman walked the American backroads, imagine living in a world where not only were your neighbors believing in these things, but scholars, saints, and explorers recorded them as fact. That's the world of the cynocephaly, the belief in the tribes of humans with the heads of dogs. The term cynocephaly comes from the Greek kynokephalos, literally dog-headed. The earliest references we know come from Herodotus in the 5th century BCE. In his book, Histories, he describes strange races living on the far edges of the known world, including people with the heads of dogs in Libya. He lists them alongside other marvels like headless men whose faces grew from their chests. Whether these were based on travelers' exaggerated reports, misunderstandings of tribal masks, or something more literal, Herodotus recorded them with the same tone he used for military campaigns, not as myth, but as ethnography. The Romans continued the tradition. Pliny the Elder and Pomponius Mela mentioned dog-headed people often, describing them as friendly and engaging in trade. The dog head wasn't a curse or a punishment, it's simply who they were. Fast forward to medieval Europe and the cynocephaly becomes a theological problem. Christian missionaries were confronted with stories of dog-headed tribes. Could such beings be converted? Were they human in spirit? In the 9th century, the monk Ratramnus of Corbie stated that if these people lived in structured communities, wore clothes, and used tools, they must have reason. And reason meant that they were capable of salvation. The debate took on a more visual form in Eastern Orthodox iconography, where St. Christopher was sometimes depicted with the head of a dog. The reasons are debated, but in these depictions, Christopher's baptism symbolically and perhaps literally transformed him, redeeming the beast into a saint. In all these accounts, cynocephaly straddle the line between human and beast, familiar and alien. Modern scholars often see them as the symbol of the other, but when you listen to modern Dogman witnesses describe what they saw, tall, upright, human-bodied, and canine-headed, it's hard not to hear an echo of Herodotus, Pliny, and the other medieval monks. Perhaps the cynocephaly never existed outside of travelers' tales. However, what if those accounts helped form the creatures instead? If this mythology seeped into belief, did it find its way into our modern woods? Let's turn the page from ancient history to modern horror. These aren't isolated tales. Across decades and states, the descriptions remain eerily consistent. In Elkhorn, Wisconsin, the Beast of Bray Road has haunted the locals since the late 1800s. Witnesses describe a creature with glowing red eyes, walking upright like a man, but covered in fur. One woman claimed it chased her car, keeping pace at terrifying speeds. Another found deep claw marks on her barn door, with livestock missing the next morning. It's fascinating that once a skeptical journalist not only became a subject matter expert on the topic, but a believer. Linda Godfrey was a journalist for the Walworth County Week and was assigned the story of a Dogman sighting. Rather than dismissing the encounters, she went in deep. Linda went and spoke with all of the witnesses and found many of them to be credible. Some of the notable stories were of Scott Bray seeing a massive dog-like creature on his farm and finding extraordinarily large canid footprints. Another, a bar manager, Laura Indrizzi, coming home at 1:30 a.m., spotted a creature on the side of the road clutching a kill in its human-like hands, staring at her with glowing yellow eyes. These stories and many others eventually became the meat of her influential book, The Beast of Bray Road, Tailing Wisconsin's Werewolf. First reported in 1887, the Michigan Dogman is said to appear in 10-year cycles. Descriptions include a 7-foot-tall creature with a canine head and a chilling howl that echoes through the woods. In 2007, a video surfaced showing a shadowy figure darting through the forest. Its authenticity remains debated. Moving eastward from Wisconsin to Michigan, we hear of another Dogman-like creature. The first recorded story of the Michigan Dogman was in 1887 when 2 loggers came across this fierce beast. They described the creature as a 7-foot-tall monster with a dog's head and the torso of a man, and it was said to have blue or amber eyes with a howl that sounded like a human. He is said to walk upright on his 2 hind legs. There have been numerous sightings through Michigan, but mostly in the northwest Lower Peninsula. Another piece of the story is the Gable film, which features a creature attacking a cameraman, with allegedly the person taking the film being killed. Now, it's a hotly debated piece of history of the local Dogman legend, but it keeps this story going. In Kentucky's Land Between the Lakes, the silence is oppressive. Locals speak of a stench, wet fur and rot, that precedes sightings. One camper described hearing heavy breathing outside his tent, followed by claw marks across the canvas. He never camped there or anywhere else again. Another family was found mutilated in their RV, with no suspects and no clear motive. So that family discovered mutilated was the Young family, and they were camping in their RV where they were apparently torn limb from limb. Deputy Philip Douglas and State Trooper William Folkson allegedly discovered the bodies. They said they found the bodies strewn about, with the daughter found unfortunately deceased up in the tree. However, the U.S. Forest Service's Carlin Lewis says there's no official record. Still, locals tell of claw marks across campers, red eyes in the woods, and a scent so foul that even officers left vomiting and incoherent. These aren't just modern urban legends. The tales go back to some of the first Europeans in the region, who were fur trappers. They claimed they were being stalked by these massive half-man, half-wolf creatures, which would howl in the night and leave mutilated carcasses of animals in its wake. When settlers came to the region, they were said to have been plagued by some large predator which lurked in the shadows, killing and maiming their livestock, with witnesses saying it was the wolf beast on 2 legs. On a personal note here, I have spoken to 2 individuals in person and seen their faces and reactions while they were recounting their sightings to me. This has me believing them completely. I don't know what they saw, but I know they saw something. Martin Groves, a retired law enforcement officer, told me about his encounter with his law enforcement partner on a scouting mission for a turkey hunt. He said that his partner and he split up and would come back later to report where they thought would be a good spot for the hunt. On his path, Martin said he met with an archer, who he spoke to for a while, asking if he had seen any signs of turkey, and the archer said that it had been eerily quiet. They parted ways, and on the way back to camp it was starting to get dark. Martin kept hearing whistling in the bush, and he felt like he was being watched. Eventually he saw what at first he thought was someone wearing a ghillie suit, but he soon discovered that it was a creature who was pursuing him. He hurried to camp, and when he got there he saw his partner clutching a shotgun, terrified, and said that something was chasing him. As they were discussing this, they heard growling from the edge of the clearing, and as they were looking around, 3 dogmen began to approach them at the edges of the campfire light. Terrified, they ran from the camp and jumped into the truck, one person driving and the other in the bed of the truck, firing at these creatures. As the dogmen were pursuing them, Martin said that he also saw 2 Bigfoot entities, and they appeared to be directing the dogmen. Later, Martin learned that the archer he spoke to earlier in the day had been found pulled from his tent and ripped to shreds. Tex Wesson told me that he had a daytime sighting of the creature in a fairly populated area of north-central Texas, around the Lake Worth area. He gave me a physical description, and I drew this creature based on his information. The first few illustrations needed tweaking, but eventually he said the image I drew gave him chills. It was exactly what he had seen. The town of Lake Worth was just over 30 minutes away from where I lived in Paradise, Texas. And we had some very strange happenings near my house that we couldn't explain. My son and his girlfriend heard scratching and movement outside of their bedroom window, and heard something begin to scramble up on the roof. Later that day, I found that the gutter, which was a solid one-piece gutter, had been damaged and bent downwards. Another time, we heard running along the property line, and my dog went nuts running up and down the fence line, but it was so dark and it was so quick I was unable to see what it was. However, midway through the running up and down the fence, our dog freaked out and ran back into the house. Also, my son saw glowing red eyes peeking over the top of our 8-foot-tall chicken run. Clearly something weird is going on, and the Small Town Monsters documentary of the Dogman Triangle in Texas points to sightings around Paradise, which is again only 30 minutes away from that sighting that Tex had. Across the U.S., reports share common traits: red eyes, upright posture, foul odor, bullet resistance, and a sense of being watched. These stories aren't just campfire tales, they're trauma narratives. People shaken, changed, and unwilling to speak publicly. While many sightings involve civilians, some involve law enforcement officers, occasionally even with shots being fired. A Michigan trucker, Joe Barger, said that he had stopped on the side of the road to change a flat in the Manistee National Forest. When he heard some unnatural growling behind him, he stood up and pulled his gun and fired several times at a dogman creature, but felt that the bullets had no visible effect. Terrified, he jumped back into his truck and sped off. In the LBL, or the Land Between the Lakes, some local legends claim deputies were so traumatized with their experiences that they couldn't file a proper police report, and in some unconfirmed tales, shots were fired but the creature disappeared unhurt. Another tale that was called into a podcast by a state trooper's aunt stated that her nephew had pulled a truck over with the occupants screaming and terrified, shouting, "Lobo, Lobo." While he was trying to calm them down, a dogman came from out of the woods. The people in the truck sped off, and the officer fired his gun into the creature several times with no effect. The trooper ran back to his car and took off. What's interesting about this is that this area was his normal route, and he would drive past this area daily, and he felt that the creature was staring at him every time he made his rounds, and in some cases he actually saw the creature again. It terrified him, and it shattered his nerves. The aunt stated that the trooper eventually turned to alcohol, was fired, and tragically committed suicide. She stated that the event changed him so dramatically that he was a shell of his former self. So how do we explain this? Could this be someone in disguise with a bulletproof vest? Or someone who thinks they're a werewolf? Psychiatrists point to clinical lycanthropy, where individuals believe they're transforming into animals, though no physical transformations or canine head materializes. There is also hypertrichosis, or excessive hair growth, which inspired sideshow wolfman and fed into folklore for years and years. And in centuries past, rabies outbreaks produced aggression, confusion, and fear, making a rabid man appear truly beast-like. But how do you reconcile bullets that leave no impact, or footprints too large or canid in shape to be human, accompanied by eyewitness accounts? No single diagnosis covers all of these. Sometimes myth meets misdiagnosis, but the stories keep pointing towards something unexplainable. To truly understand this phenomenon, we must step outside the traditional folklore box and look into more esoteric explanations. Venture into the Navajo Nation and you'll find skinwalkers, witches who transform into animals through dark ritual magic, not by accident or curse. They are feared and unmentionable in the tribes, powerful and destructive. It's believed that they gain their powers through dark magic and taboo acts like killing a loved one. These shamanistic practices are the antithesis of the medicine man. Instead of using their powers for good, they use them for power, revenge, and destruction. At Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta Basin of Utah, witnesses have claimed to see large wolf-like figures that absorb bullets, vanish, or appear through fog. Whether spirit, adversary, or guardian, these beings echo across the Dogman folklore. Some researchers propose Dogmen are ultra-terrestrials, beings from parallel dimensions glimpsed through window areas, where reality thins. Writer John Keel describes these window areas as zones where UFOs, cryptids, and strange synchronicities converge. Add in the quantum observer effect, which suggests reality may shift based on belief. Could centuries of fear manifest something tangible? Others point to ancient hybrids, Nephilim reawakened, genetically engineered, or demonically possessed. So on what basis is this concept of supernatural or interdimensional creatures proposed? Well, across different regions and witnesses, two odd details surface often enough to be worth noting. The first is the metallic door sound, a noise described as a heavy, resonant metal latch or gate slamming shut, heard in the moments before or during a Dogman sighting. In some accounts, the noise seems to come from nowhere in particular and is often followed within seconds by the appearance of the creature. The second recurring detail is the creature's proximity to cemeteries. Reports from rural America, the UK, and even parts of Eastern Europe include sightings of upright canine figures pacing at the edges of graveyards or moving between the headstones. In some traditions, these locations are seen as liminal spaces, boundaries between the living and the dead. This connection between the dog-headed figure and cemeteries is not new. In the religious landscape of ancient Egypt, the jackal-headed god Anubis served as both a guardian and a guide. Depicted as a man with the head of a black jackal, Anubis presided over mummification and the journey of the dead. His imagery reflects a recurring human archetype, the upright, canine-headed sentinel standing at the boundary between the living and the dead, an image that echoes, however faintly, in some modern accounts of cemetery-linked Dogman sightings. This brings us to a crucial question. Are these just local legends, or is this a global archetype? The answer is that these aren't just Midwestern stories. Other werewolf-like creatures live beyond those Midwest fields, and the creatures from different cultures share a similar identity, a hybrid of human and animal, often with dark or magical origins. These beings highlight a common thread in folklore worldwide, the fear of the human who has lost their humanity, or who can transform into a beast. In Louisiana's Cajun folklore, the rougarou is a cursed human who transforms into a wolf or dog-like creature. The name comes from the French phrase loup-garou, which means man-wolf. Unlike the lycanthrope of classic European lore, the rougarou is often a person who has broken a religious or social rule, like not observing Lent for 7 consecutive years. Once a person becomes a rougarou, they can pass the curse to another human if they draw the new person's blood. The rougarou is said to hunt and kill humans, particularly those who have also broken the curse's originating rule. In some tales, the curse can only be broken if the rougarou doesn't draw a human's blood for over 101 days. In many parts of Africa and the Middle East, the were-hyena is a common figure in folklore. Often associated with sorcery and malicious intent, these beings are thought to be blacksmiths, whose trade is sometimes considered mysterious or magical in these cultures. In countries like the Sudan, Tunisia, and Morocco, stories of were-hyenas describe them as shapeshifters who can change from human to hyena at will. They often raid villages, steal livestock, and desecrate graves. The were-hyena's transformation is usually voluntary and tied to malevolent acts rather than a cursed state. The adlet comes from the mythology of the Inuit people of Greenland. It's a fascinating creature that is part human, part dog. In the legend, an Inuit woman marries a dog creature and gives birth to 10 children. 5 are human, and the other 5 are adlet, a type of half-human, half-dog hybrid. The human children are the ancestors of the people who went on to populate Europe, while the adlet are creatures with human torsos and dog-like legs and feet. The story of the adlet highlights a different cultural perspective on human-animal hybrids. Rather than being a cursed transformation, they are a distinct race, highlighting the close connection between the Inuit and the animals that surround them. In ancient Mesoamerican cultures, particularly among the Aztec and the Mayan people, a Nahual is a human who has the ability to transform into an animal, such as a jaguar, puma, or wolf. In this tradition, the Nahual is not a cursed being, but a person with a special spiritual gift or power, often a shaman or sorcerer who uses their animal form for protection or guidance. The concept of the Nahual is still part of some indigenous beliefs today, showing that the archetype of human-animal connection is a living tradition, not just a historical legend. This global tapestry of man-beasts, the rougarou, the were-hyena, the adlet, and the Nahual, shows us that the idea of human turning into animal is a deeply rooted part of our collective consciousness, a reoccurring symbol of the wild, the mysterious, and the dark side of the human nature. Psychologist Carl Jung called this the shadow self, the side of humanity we repress, violence, lust, irrationality. Maybe the werewolf and dogman myths live because they give form to our darkest impulses. The werewolf's journey from ancient myth to modern-day cryptid is mirrored by its evolution in pop culture, particularly in film. Cinematic werewolves have defined how people today understand the creature, establishing tropes like the full moon, silver bullets, and the monstrous, painful transformation. The definitive cinematic werewolf was born in 1941 with Universal Pictures' The Wolfman. While not the first werewolf film, it established the core mythology that would dominate the genre for decades. Starring Lon Chaney Jr. as the cursed Larry Talbot, the film introduced the idea of a good man tormented by a beast he can't control, the curse being passed through bite, and the only cure being death by silver. Jack Pierce's iconic makeup design, the mix of human and wolf features, set the visual standard for the Wolfman hybrid. This film's tragic hero archetype and his rules for lycanthropy are now so ingrained in popular culture that many people assume they are from ancient folklore, when in reality they are an invention of Hollywood. The 1980s brought a revolution in special effects and a grittier, more visceral take on the werewolf myth. And the year 1981 was a landmark with the release of two influential films. The Howling, directed by Joe Dante. In this film, there was a clever blend of horror and dark comedy. It featured groundbreaking transformation scenes by Rob Bottin that focused on the sheer physical agony of the change, with bones visibly elongating and skin stretching. An American Werewolf in London, a John Landis classic with Oscar-winning makeup by Rick Baker, took the body horror transformation to a new level. The long, agonizing, and surreal sequence of a man transforming on screen is considered one of the most iconic moments in horror cinema. The film also expertly blended genuine terror with morbid humor, further expanding the genre's possibilities. And modern adaptations range from action and romance to cryptid horror. In the years since the 80s, the werewolf has continued to evolve on screen, taking on new forms and facing different threats. In Brotherhood of the Wolf, this French historical action film offers a high-octane interpretation of the beast of Gévaudan. The film's theory for the beast's identity, a mechanical suit and a trained lion. It's one of the most memorable and unique takes on the historical mystery. In Dog Soldiers, the British film puts a squad of soldiers up against a pack of incredibly powerful and fast werewolves, creating a sense of action-packed survival horror. The werewolves in this film are less humanoid and more animalistic, reflecting a dogman or wolf-dog archetype. In the 2005 Beast of Bray Road and the 2018 documentary The Bray Road Beast directly adapt the modern-day cryptid accounts from Wisconsin. They bring the Dogman phenomenon to the screen, treating it less as a classic werewolf story and more as a documented cryptid encounter. In the film Blood and Chocolate, the werewolf transformation from person to actual wolf through the magical and peaceful transformation sequences is quite different from the many body horror elements you see in other werewolf films. The story is also different. It's a tragic romance tale about the love between a human and a lichen and the turmoil it brings to the pack, and it's something quite unique. In the 2015 movie Howl, a British horror film that takes a claustrophobic, siege-style approach to the werewolf subgenre. The movie's plot is simple but effective. A late-night commuter train is stranded in a remote forest, and the passengers soon realize they're being hunted by a pack of vicious creatures. The Wolf of Snow Hollow in 2020 is an independent film that presents as a murder mystery with a werewolf twist, blending the procedural elements of a police story with the absurdity of a small-town cryptid hunt. These films and others like Ginger Snaps, Wolf, and the Underworld series demonstrate the werewolf's versatility. It can be a tragic victim, a symbol of primal rage, a romantic figure, or a terrifyingly real cryptid. The enduring power of these creatures on screen is a testament to that fact. Whether from ancient curse or modern sightings, the image of the man-beast continues to haunt our imagination. So here's where the moonlight leaves us. Werewolves, dogmen, cynocephaly, each echoing the other across centuries, continents, and wild spaces. Some stories find plausible roots in disease or mass hysteria. Others point to real encounters, clawed cars, herring grills, footprints too large for wolves, and creatures that shrug off bullets. Are these legends mirrors of our fear or something more real? If you're driving home beneath a full moon and your headlights catch red eyes in the bushes, ask yourself, is it folklore or something unexplainable out there? My theory is that these creatures are inter- or ultra-dimensional, and they travel through rifts in the fabric of our dimension. Those portals, reverberating with the sound of the metal being scraped open, provide passage into our realm, where they have an avenue of escape while being pursued. I believe that we live in a world of supernatural wonder, and are only just now coming back to our understanding of those parts of our daily lives. Thanks for walking this path with me on Arcane Station. I'm Mike Porter, Keep your lights on, your mind open, and your eyes peeled for the unexplained. If you like our content, please subscribe, tell a friend, and visit us at arcanestation.com. That's arcane-station.com. Soon we'll have a Discord channel open up where we can discuss all things cryptid, conspiracy, and the bizarre. Thank you so much for visiting.